Hello guys, David Vose here. Well, I'm getting an early start today. Got up, got me some coffee, and I was sitting here meditating and looking at the beautiful trees and the colors of fall, the puppies play. And I started thinking about daffodils. And because we know we did that video yesterday, I guess I was looking at that and seeing the comments and stuff. And we talked about health, and we talked about the millennium, the millennial, whatever word you choose to use. And we talked about fish and different things. Well, and the herbs. And we talked about the herbs that are for the healing of the nations. Now, I know that the millennials about living and existing and eating and drinking and doing everything that people are going to be continuing to do. Yes, I think we'll eat and drink in the new world, in the millennial to come. Eventually, just as the seventh day of the week represents the whole millennium, I think the millennium represents some greater eternity. There are layers to this. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. It's going to fit in with this. But I had this huge revelation, guys. I think it's always been kind of bubbling inside of me, an undercurrent of this information. I haven't talked on it. That's how I learn, because I have this inner knowing that I think we all have. But it was kind of awakened in me when I was younger, and I don't want to get into that. We talked about the angel that I've seen and things that happened to me. But I get this. I'm just telling you this because it's not something that we have actually mentioned before. And I didn't consciously think about it in this way. And that's why it's a revelation, an apocalypse. That's what the word apocalypse means. I mean, so wait a minute. The apocalypse is the end of the world and all the violence and people dying. How's that have anything to do with Revelation? Because they used to call the book of Revelation the apocalypse. Because it's about the end of the world. And what is the end of the world? Murdering one another? No. It's entering into the new world, becoming a new creation, being born again. And so it happens on the seventh day. Why? Well, something changes. Think about rest. What is rest? You go to sleep. There's night and there's day. Spend half your time resting. The Indian teaching, the Hindu and Buddhist teaching, is that we have rest and then we have work. And those two things are what all of existence is. Rest and work. Although I wouldn't use the word work because that sounds like slavery. Not about slavery. It is not about slavery. It is about action, going forward and going backwards. It's about, I don't know about going backwards, but going forward. Okay. And then resting and thinking about what you might do, planning, healing, recovering, recreation, restoration. That's what the restoration of all things spoken of by the mouth of all the holy prophets is talking about. But I had a huge revelation about what it means to enter into his rest. Now, first of all, I've said we're not under any law, and I stand by that because that is the foundation of our motives. If we were ever under law, we would be a slave forever. We're not slaves. I mean, even if you didn't want to call it a slave, you say, oh, I'm just working for the Lord, right? That's something I want to do. I'm not really a slave. It's not a bad thing, Dave. We're his servants. Well, Yahweh always calls us servants. But Jesus said, you're not my servant. You're not my slave. I've told you all things I've done. A master doesn't tell his servants or his slaves what he's going to do, but I've told you everything. I call you my friends. So I don't believe in slavery, and I don't believe in working in that sense. And I do believe that's what it means in the Sabbath law. You will work 6 days, and on the seventh day you will rest. Okay, if we were forced to do it, if we were commanded to rest, it would not even be fun. Not in my eyes. And I don't believe that's the meaning of rest itself. To rest means to relax and to restore, and it is a natural thing. It cannot be forced. You can't command somebody to be happy. You can't command somebody to have joy. And that's what I believe the Sabbath should be, is joy. And so we'll talk about why we're going to do it, but we're not commanded to do it. Because all of the commandments of Yahweh, some of them are arbitrary, made up restrictions that simply are ridiculous. But yet they still have some basis in reality. A woman is unclean for like 2-3 weeks, depending on whether she has a male or female baby. She's unclean. Well, that is arbitrary. That's ridiculous. Women are never unclean. And Jesus actually cleansed the woman of the flow of blood simply by saying, your curse is removed. Now, did she never have menstrual cycles again? I don't know. That's a kind of a parable thing. I don't know what happened in the literal, but I believe it literally happened. And I'm not here to talk about that little story that happened 2,000 years ago. What we want to know is, what does it mean? It means that there is a curse placed upon creation. Our mother Eve was cursed. And, she's a part of all of us. That's the divine mother, the Holy Spirit, that becomes one and teaches us all things. She goes through the initiation of life. She partakes of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to become like God. The divine being, I should say. I don't use the word God unless I am trying to say it because some people who might be listening to me wouldn't even know what I was talking about. It's easier for them to understand what I mean when I say God. But anyway, I don't want to go into why I don't use the term God here. We've got some other things to talk about. I want to stay on track. But so Eve, in this literal sense, when she, our first mother, when she partook of life as it is in this carnal world, she represents the conscious mind. The conscious mind is innocent. It's neither good nor evil. Our mother is not evil, but she is good now, because on the 6th day, Elohim made Adim, male and female, and he said it was very good. It was very good. So the nature, or the essential nature of everything, is good. And Eve really does represent the part of the universe that's the physical universe. She's the physical universe you see. All the stars, the moon, the entire galaxy is our mother. We're born from her womb. But the Father is the mind, the spiritual part that you don't see. And by the way, there is a heavenly mother and an earthly mother. There is a physical father and a heavenly father. So we're only talking about Adam and Eve in that story in Genesis, where the man represents the spiritual. And he was not deceived, because the mind is not deceived, but the conscious mind is. The higher conscious mind is never deceived. Now, the higher conscious mind is not really in control of the lower conscious mind. They have to come together willingly in union because they agree. But the lower conscious mind must go through a process to learn to agree, to become acclimated. Because learning is a process. You don't have learning until you have time go by and you have experience. So our mother Eve partook of fruit, and yes, it may have been literally. And we'll discuss what fruit that may have been. In the Babylonian cuneiform, the Assyrio-Babylonian, Sumerian talks about it. They show on the cuneiform pictures of cannabis. And it's presented as the tree of life in the garden. You can literally see the garden setting and the serpent and so forth. And the tree of life was cannabis. But in other cultures, it's a mushroom. In some cultures, it's a cactus. And I tell you that no matter where you live in the world, whether the climate is dry or humid, mountainous or by the ocean or wherever, there is a ecological system there. There is a big tree that all the other animals take refuge under. There are a type of flower that grows there that the bees can use to make the elixir of life that we'll talk about, that can come from flowers, blossoms, and certain herbs. In all the symbolisms, such as the Mother's Grimm, you know, we have all these nursery rhymes, is what we're calling them today. They're really holy scripture. They tell the same stories as the Greek mythology, and these are ancient stories gathered by the Grimm brothers, and they put them all down. And so they portray truths. And you'll always see the fairies and the gnomes and the spirits and the mushroom and the salamander or the serpent. The serpent offers us the knowledge of good and evil, and it is the entrance into the Sabbath, or the place of rest, the great convocation where we go back home and talk to the elders. It is a real portal from this world to the other. It was something that they did reoccurringly on Sabbaths and new moons and great holy festivals. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. It's very important. That's pretty much the subject of this video. But when she partook of the fruit, she became initiated into learning. That's what people do to become priests. They're initiated and they're given wisdom. And at the end of 3 years of initiation, they have heard the words, they know, and they have understanding that it's not lawful to teach others until they've been initiated. And it just means that no one can know. It's an experience. You must know. It is gnosis. All these little ceremonies and initiations and baptisms and everything else in the world is only a type to tell us the true initiation, to give us the true temple. The temple is the body, the universe. We dwell in it, the material. We are the being. All of this is to help us understand the true initiation. Life itself is an experience to get gnosis. And we both have the male and the female, the mind, higher mind, and the conscious mind on earth, which doesn't yet know because it's a newborn avatar. And based on what it already knows, or what it believes, what it allows into its own consciousness, because this consciousness is veiled. The woman is veiled and she doesn't see reality. So she doesn't know. Now, if she doesn't know and she does something, she could get into big trouble because she doesn't know. It's risky. But the only way to get to the top of the mountain is to walk and, go beyond what you would want to go. It's hard. Your muscles got to get strong. Not easy. It's exertion. It's work. It's not slavery. You do it because you want to. Because there's something compelling at the top of the mountain. You must know the curiosity to know what's on the other side of the mountain. And so it's all a big natural process. Adam tell her, hey, get up there and start climbing. Eve would have said no. Remember, when they were originally created, it says that Eve and Adam were equal parts. The subjection thing was because supposedly she sinned. And her curse was he would have dominion over her. So she's under the curse, but it's not just a law. It's actually some kind of natural thing because she's got blood flowing. And that's a curse. That's a sign of this curse. So it's something from the divine. It's not just from Adam, you're the one that did it, so you get to be the one that bears this responsibility and pays the consequences. Well, in a sense, because she's giving birth to a child. I mean, that's what this flow of blood is. It is a curse. It makes her legally unclean, but not as a person. And I'll tell you why. Number one, she's not doing anything wrong. All of this law of Moses that condemns all of us, it condemns everybody. So what does that mean? It has nothing to do with whether you're good or bad. It's simply the law, and you're all condemned by it. That's what the law is. By the works of law, no one shall be justified. You cannot be justified because the flesh is enmity against the spirit. So when you're in the flesh, you're an enemy of spirit. So Adam and Eve became enemies, the spirit and the flesh. But yet it cannot stand. There must be a restoration because the conscious mind needs to come to an awareness, an awakening, to let the thoughts in it die and not be afraid that their being will die. You must be willing to make the sacrifice, to offer up the lamb. It's a willing sacrifice, to live our lives as a living sacrifice. Because if we give, we shall receive. Whoever gains his life shall lose his life. And this is the paradox. So get this, the woman is subject to the man, but that's just a temporary law because nature says that the female is the weaker vessel and the man has this brute strength and he can force her. And so nature gives him that power. But the woman has another power, beauty. She can lure a strong man to do things. She can say, in reality, I'm not going to love you. I'm not going to want you. You can't get what you want from me. You can take it, but you're not going to get what you want. Because if you beat me, if you force me, if you demand write a contract and say, this is it, now you're under legal restrictions and you must this and that. Well, you can do that on the surface, but that's not what you're after. You're after this person to be one with you, to love you, to want you. So, yeah, you can do that. It's an arbitration of what this is all about. It's the paradox that a man might try to do this until he learns to let go and to die to what his power, which is he could do it by force, but he got to let go of that if he really wants the prize. And he's got to become like a child in a sense. I mean, he's got to let go of his brute strength and be humble and be good and be kind and say, please. Well, at the same time, the woman can use her beauty and her wisdom to get anything she wants. These are both clearly powerful things. But it is an example of the reality. The reality is that we have these two minds. We have the spiritual being and this little avatar, which is ignorant and doesn't know. And because this little avatar doesn't know, it's like a child that's under law until it's of age. Many parables we could use. We're under the schoolmaster that leads to Christ. And we're all the church or the woman. We're this physical, conscious world. And we had an agreement that was not the right way. The union of love. But it was the demands. The man being the brute, the patriarch. And he made a law and says the woman is subject. Well, just as the law of Moses is temporary, and it was only something we were subject to, the law, so long as a certain age existed, that they had law and they imposed these judgments and condemnations on us, we were forced to keep the law. Nobody ever wanted to. But we would be stoned or crucified if we didn't do it. So that's why we were under the law. Didn't make it right, but it was naturally occurring. These men were stronger physically, but they weren't getting what they wanted out of this arrangement. They were getting death. All their children became rebellious because they rebelled against that authority by instinct. Their women didn't love them. There was violence, there was rape, there was murder, there was bad things going on. Oh yes, they had the power to do it that way. That's this world, where we're all learning. Well, eventually the men decided, wait a minute, this isn't what we want. We want these women to love us. And we started writing poetry, and we started saying, okay, the princess kisses the prince and he awakens. And we have all these stories. We knew that intrinsically, the nature as it is symbolic of some beautiful, it's like a fertility rite. It's representing to us great truths, philosophy, the love of wisdom, to seek and to know and to understand. It is a gnosis, an experience, an awakening. So, in the Ten Commandments, we have, in our Bible, we have this thing where it says that there were these 10 commandments or words, the 10 words. We know that those 10 words are not the holy pronouncements or the holy words of El Elyon at Mount Horeb or the Mountain of Light. We know because the word is the new covenant. And there's only one. And it's Jesus. And that word is Jesus. That is love. He is grace. It's one word that describes the free child, the firstborn, the only begotten, the pure and undefiled child of the Lord. You can hear the word from that, or you can hear the word from the deity of vengeance. I am deity and that is my name, and if you don't bow down, I'm going to whoop off your head. There's none else but me. I am the jealous deity. I am the deity of vengeance. I will not pardon your sins unto the third and to the fourth generations. And get this, you will by no means enter into my rest. You will by no means. Absolutely not. And he drove them out in his wrath. Get thee out of my paradise. You will not partake of the tree of life. I forbid you to have knowledge. Look, think about this. You think that we're not supposed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that Eve did something wrong? Well, wait a minute. How about the tree of life? You want that one? Well, what if it was forbidden? What if Almighty said to you, I'm sorry, that tree over there, if you eat that, you'll have eternal life and wisdom like me, but don't you ever do it? Would you say, oh, okay, what do you want me to do then? Oh, I want you to be my slave. I will not offer you eternal life. You will work 6 days, and on this certain day that is the real Sabbath that El Elyon made, on the seventh day he rested from all that he had done. And Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He says, I have my own Sabbath. Okay, it's a little bit like the other one. Everything's like a type and an anti-type. the reality and then this little illusion. It looks like it. Like we build a temple out of stones, but the real temple is the building of the universe. You're just making a copy of the blueprint, and it's not a very good copy at all. You just got this, oh, look at this temple. It's 500 feet high. It's the most amazing thing. Well, it's 500 feet high. The universe is infinite. And it would boggle your mind to even understand one little point that you could write on the end of a pinhead. That would blow your mind if you even knew that much real truth. But we don't, because we're just little babies. So this is another analogy. Like we said, there is the word, which is the new covenant, which is grace and love. Give and you shall receive. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is my word, my commandment. Same thing. I mean, it's his word, it's his saying, but we're to take it as a commandment. So we are under a commandment, but it's an odd commandment. It's a positive one. Give and you will receive. Right? The other one was the negative, was like, if you don't do what I say, you will die. So it's a very negative thing, and the outcome is death. Flip side, simply act in a positive way, and all these positive things will be given to you. Well, it's very simple, isn't it? You are kind and sweet. You use a little honey and you get, what you're after. You give a woman flowers and you say nice things, and she might love you. She has some beautiful things behind that veil. But right now, so long as the woman is veiled, as long as she's in this conscious mind, she doesn't know, she's got to eat and partake of knowledge of good and evil in order to find out what is good. To become like the divine, you must be able to discern between good and evil. Good spirits, bad spirits, we have to discern the spirits. That's something we learn. It's a gift. Okay? It isn't something we get because we're better than others. And it isn't even a gift that he only gives some people. It's the divine who is impartial. He gives everyone the gift of rain, everyone the gift of sunshine, and he gives everyone the gift of his spirit and wisdom. But it is a gift. Life is a gift. But it isn't earned. That's why it's a gift. It's simply voila, free. And everybody has access to life. And that man would have that woman. It's a gift. And her heart would be his. But he must also love her and give to her so that she will want to give back. But by the same token, the woman doesn't know yet wisdom. She doesn't learn what is good because she has to experience bitterness. The woman represents the conscious mind. All of us, we're all going through this stage. We're subject and we've got the flow of blood. Why the flow of blood? Because through the experience and the pain of giving birth, we're going to give birth to the seed, the child that's going to be the savior of the world. Now, that man didn't produce the savior. The woman did. Right? Well, he had to help. But he was the mind. He already was aware. He's that spiritual, conscious, happy, perfect will of the mind, which we all have access to. We all do. The man and the woman can live in peace. They always could. But because of the law, because of the commandment, we died. That's it. There was nothing else other than the commandment. People started, and where did the commandment come from? Ignorance, not knowing that your power, though you have it, isn't to be used for that. You needed to learn. So, the Sabbath then was made for something. It was made for us. And it's not like the creation in Genesis chapter 1. We've said that it's a spiritual creation, that it's a existence. We were really there. We didn't have bodies with blood, but Adam and Eve lived forever. They were immortal. This is before they were cut in half, separated in their psyches. The carnal mind, or the conscious mind, being separated from the higher mind. When they were all just one, they lived forever. What did they look like? They were people. Because the temple has all the attributes of the real temple. The temple is made in the other one's likeness. Adam was made in the likeness of deity because he was the literal earthly man, but he's a microcosm of the macrocosm. Every cell looks exactly like the other cells. And even the whole, they look like the whole, the macrocosm. Everything's identical, as above, so below. That doesn't come from Aleister Crowley, as above, so below. That comes from ancient Pythagorean wisdom. By the way, I do not quote from Aleister Crowley or modern Kabbalism or cultism, though there might be some truth in there. But it is men who were trying to understand and pervert and obscure the deity of Christ and to turn everything upside down, which we don't get involved with. This was the Illuminati infiltrating of the ancient wisdom. But as above, so below is something that is from the ancient Greek philosophy of wisdom that came from the priesthoods. And I believe the person who first really said that was Jesus Christ, or Thoth of the Egyptians, or Hermes Trismegistus. But what I'm getting at with all of this is that we have this law that we're not under, but we thought we were. That's why he's a deceiver and a murderer. But we're really not, never were. We were only under it because we were deceived. But here's the kicker. Being deceived is natural. It was part of the path. Just like the work it takes to get up the hill is part of getting up the hill. And the joy of being on the top and knowing what's on the other side is the goal. Now, the goal is not to work and to strain ourselves, but it is the pathway. Gnosis is the goal, but death is the pathway. And so, because the law brought death, death then was necessary. Like the Apostle Paul says, he who is made alive is not made alive unless first it dies. It may be a bare grain of wheat, but it's planted in the soil and it dies and decays. And through the death of the outer, the little seed, which nobody understands what that is, it's invisible. It comes from nowhere and everywhere. In other words, there is no time and space in there. It's the source. And it's eternal and infinite and always exists and knows exactly. It's the pattern. And it's beautiful when you watch it just start manifesting. But it can't come out and manifest and grow and bloom and blossom and the flowers and the petals and the smell and the aroma and the joy. It can't happen until first the body dies. A bare little grain has a little body that must die for the inner spiritual to grow. And so Paul says, in order for us to blossom, to become like the divine being, we had to die. And the odd thing is that if Yahweh would have said, yeah, go ahead, I'm going to explain all this to you. Partake of this knowledge. It's going to be so hard, you're going to fall down and die. And it's going to hurt, and it's going to be pain. Please don't do it. I don't want to see you in pain. But if you do it and you go through that pain, you're going to have the greatest joy you ever, you're going to be born again. Well, he could have said it that way. But Yahweh, being a deceiver, only knew himself. He said, I am deity, there is none else. He didn't know the Spirit. He just knew you're going to die, and he likes it because that's who he is. Vengeance. And he said, if you don't want to die, tough, because I've made a law. No matter what you do, you live in this world, you're going to die. You know why? Because that's what this world's for. He's the deity of this world, the tempter, the tester, the liar. And we live in the lying world. But it's for a reason. The disciples asked Jesus, they said, Jesus, this man was born blind. So if he was born blind, and since we know that the divine being is good, certainly the divine being wouldn't have given him blindness. That's not a good gift. So why was he born blind? Everybody else has got sight. They're looking and seeing and enjoying life and walking around. Surely there's some kind of error here. This is natural. People are supposed to see. Like, reality is we're supposed to see and have joy. Do what we want. Have freedom to see. So why is this man born this way? If he was born that way, he didn't ever sin. So was it because his parents sinned? Or did he sin in another life before he was born into this life, and he's paying for what he did in another life in this life? And Jesus said, well, in this case, which is everybody's case, because we're all blind, aren't we? It is for the glory of deity to be revealed. And the apostles tell us that the glory of the divine will be revealed in us. So now you know what that means. It means we're going to see. Oh, it's going to be a miracle. Oh, it's going to be so amazing. It's the goal. We're going to see. But we're born blind. It isn't really because of sin. There is no such thing. Technically, yes. It's the consequences of not knowing. Let's not call it sin. Let's say that we simply live in a world that there's, pits that you could fall in, right? Rocks come down out of the sky. Fire and sulfur comes out of the mountains and kills people, wild animals. You're going to die in this world. But you came here to learn. It's a maze. You're going to go through all this and you're going to conquer each and everything you can. Physically, you'll build a house, keep you out of the scorching heat, out of the flooding, pouring rain. You might put clothes on so you don't get sunburned. You're going to learn to overcome all these things because you're going to become like the divine being. You're going to have wisdom. You're going to learn the difference between good and evil. You can overcome this world. And if it weren't for this overcoming, you'd never reach out and gain the higher. You'd never be able to know you could see. If you lived in a hole and never came out with the sunshine, you wouldn't need seeing. You'd be like a mole. You lived down there at one time. But that's not the goal. The goal is to become free. All living things will become free and will have the ability to know, to see. That's what Jesus really meant. When you're talking about seeing, just the physical world, that's just a parable. We're talking about truly knowing, not seeing, but knowing. When the man was born without knowing, you were born without knowing. You're the creation, the church, the woman who's under the curse. See, it was just a type of the reality, just a temple made with hands. We don't care about that. We don't do ceremonies. We're trying to understand that this world we live in, this little avatar, is from the light. But we're down here to go through this death so that we can know. We're trying to get gnosis. Well, the first chapter of Genesis is the creation of the reality. There were trees there, mountains and rocks and birds and all kinds of things, but only living creatures. Only living creatures. Only immortal beings. Nothing that is immortal is evil or deformed or in some kind of grotesque, carnivorous, lustful nature. That's a degradation. That's the nature that must be tamed. You put a bit in its mouth. Jesus came riding into Jerusalem, the city of peace, with a bit in the donkey's mouth. He had overcome the world. And he had found that nature that's in nature, that's there already. There's good and there's evil. There's sheep and goats. And he was like the sheep. He was the lamb that taketh away the sin of the world. There is a nature about this nature that will take away all the evil of the other nature. You know, all that is bad, he's going to reverse. And he makes all things for good to those who love him. No matter what evil befalls you, it will be used for good. And he will never let you suffer beyond what you can bear. And with any temptation, he will give you the way out. This is why they have to stop and be calm and listen. Because every time you have a bad thing happen to you, you have to remember it's not for bad. It's only for good. And if you will listen carefully and be calm, maybe take 2 or 3 days to sit there meditating and waiting upon the Lord, and the Lord will give you the answer. And then you'll solve that problem and you'll have 10 times what you had before. Because every time you make the advancement, it's worth it. And you will be able to see. You'll have knowledge. So we lived in a perfect world. But this evil ogre came down and stole us away and made this, fake little garden with a hedge about it. And all these beasts, which is the zodiac, the nature of this carnal world. And he deceived the woman, the creation. And the creation groaneth and travaileth in pain until now. Waiting for what? For the revealing of the sons of deity. Which is who? All of us. Why? Because we're all going to die. And that's why in Revelation chapter 6 it says, I saw those under the altar that had died. And he said, they said, how long, Lord? Oh, we're dying down here. Why? Well, he says, you just wait a little while longer until all your fellow brothers have died as you. That's the goal. We must die in order to live. But we got to have this ability to die willingly. We're going to die many times physically without willingly doing it. And we'll learn a lot from that. One day we'll get to a place where we'll be like the lamb, willingly just goes to slaughter. Knowing that the being can never die. That we're imprisoned in this world. That we've got to die in order to live. We've got to learn. So the perfect world, paradise, is always there and always will be with us. Sometimes when you dream, you go there. If you partake of herbs, you will go there. It's a place. And it's real. It's a physical place. You can live and walk around and talk to people and remember things and have experiences. It is, wow. It is the blueprint. It is the perfect place. But we won't live there for billions of years, maybe 1 trillion years. That's called nirvana. Nirvana is 1 trillion years, and that's how long it's going to take us to get there. And right now, we don't even want that. It's like telling a heroin addict, hey, stop taking that heroin. It's killing you. Well, I know, but I got to have more. Wait till that person gets to a point where they're going to die. And the only thing they can do is seek for help. Then they'll come for help. But we've all got to go through our downs and we got to get to the bottom before we can go back up. We got to put our hand in the fire and see, oh, that burns. And then we'll pull it out. But you can't tell somebody before they did it. They got to know for themselves. We're all learning. Sometimes it takes many lifetimes. We'll all learn. So this world is the world that we make. Not the world that the divine being, that our higher consciousness made. That will always be there. That's the reality. But we make illusions. We make little worlds, little bubbles, little avatars, and we live in them. What are these little avatars? They are little variables of the whole, parts of the whole, but not knowing everything else. That's like Yahweh. I am deity. You think you're the soul. You're the consciousness, but you're only in this lower consciousness and you're unaware. You're cut off from the higher. In order to go home, the goal is rest. But we got to work to get there. So 6 days in the type, we're working and slaving for this, ogre. And he lets us have 1 day off. But that's just a parable. In reality, we're learning, experiencing, and we're dying, and we're living. Heights and depths. Nights and days. Until we reach the pinnacle. And there are many plateaus. Each one has a greater glory. Oh, you don't have to give up all of your little avatars right now. Ultimately, those are just little illusions. You will eventually become the divine being. But that's not how it works. We're not there yet. It's infinite. We'll never do it because it's an infinite journey. He dwells in unapproachable light. But all along the way, we give up the past to go to the future. Right now, all we're going to be given up is the lustful nature. And once we fully sacrifice the body, the outer, it's like a ring. Every planet has little rings and they fall off. You look at Saturn, you've got all these rings. One day they'll all fall, one by one. And it'll be a planet where people will live there. The Earth had a canopy of water. It fell. So these more dense rings fall and we go into the heights. We could talk about it scientifically, but we got very little time. We're almost 45 minutes now, and I've just got a little bit left to tell you the whole point of this. What we want to talk about is the Sabbath. So, El Elyon, the Most High, the Almighty, El Shaddai, made the Sabbath. He made it for man. Why? Because in 6 days, he created the earth. And he worked. It started with fish, and then birds, and then mammals, and then men. Fish are the lowest, and plants are even before that. So that's why we're able to eat them, because they're not souls. They're not living avatars. They're just more like plants. But it's a stage of this evolutionary, transmigratory of the spirit. And all these little avatars. And so what the divine being made, the reality, is the whole system, and we're all going through it. We start off as little birds or little fish and minerals, and the spirit gains and learns wisdom to become like the divine, because it's the same divine spirit that's in the lower, smaller things. It's all made in the image of the great. Even the smallest little particle is the exact duplicate of the great. The child is equal to the father, but it has to grow up and learn. It's a steward until the time comes that he is of age and he becomes the heir. So this is how the universe works. So Yahweh makes this little kingdom, but it's not the real kingdom, the reality. Yahweh couldn't have made this whole process of fish, and millions of years of becoming, birds, and the spirits transmigrate. All this process is the divine nature, the reality. Yahweh didn't know anything about that. Yahweh's this lower conscious mind. He's only aware of what's going on down here. And he wants his wife and his kids to be in subjection. He'll beat you if you don't listen. Okay. It's temporary, but it is a microcosm of the great macrocosm. That little temple and the things they did in there is just a type and a shadow of the reality. So the true Sabbath was made then by our Heavenly Father. What is it for? Well, it's to enter into rest. So have you ever asked yourself, why does the Bible say enter in? You will not enter into my rest. It's a very odd way to say it, isn't it? Because if it's talking about a seventh day that we just stop working, and the 10 commandments are these literal 10 words, and not the word or the commandment of Jesus, which is love. It's kind of, some have compared the Ten Commandments to the love by saying, well, if you love deity and your neighbor, you're going to do all these 10 commandments. Really? Maybe in some way, because I do think it's a type. Because when it says, here's the first 3 commandments, get down and worship me or I'll kill you. That don't sound like it's a good thing in any way. All the first 3 commandments is this deity is jealous and angry and he wants you to bow down. That's not our Heavenly Father. And then the 4th commandment is slavery and the woman is a slave and all the other commandments and adultery and all these. Oh yeah, okay, we're not supposed to steal. We're not supposed to murder. That's good, right? And then he makes genocide laws. So I don't think that the law in its literal sense is good. I think it's death. Paul says the letter of the law is death. And the law chiseled on stone came with a glory in Corinthians. And that glory, with the fire, the smoke, the gloom, the darkness upon that mountain, it was a kind of glory. The people stood back in awe, and the mountain trembled and quaked. And he said, if that law came in some kind of glory, how much more will the true law come in glory? A glory that will be unfathomable to the mind present now. So if you understand what he's saying is that was done away. It was a writing of commandments, a word, commandment. Same, they're not the same word, but his word is a commandment. It comes from the divine being, right? Yahweh has commandments and Jesus has commandments and Jesus is love. So these commandments were written on granite stones. And the Apostle Paul says that represents your stony heart. Again, we're talking about the difference between force and willingness. And the outcome isn't that we are in fear of deity, and that's a good thing. And he would kill us, and that's a good thing. And he's jealous, and that's it. No. It's only a type. The greater is the willing, the love. The man and the woman come together because they love each other, not because the man and the woman have a contract. It says, you will obey me, this is a marriage license, and you are my slave. And a woman shall not go free, as do the other slaves, like other men. Women will never be free. Exodus 21, verse 7. If you sell your daughter as a slave, she'll not go out free, as do the men. But she will be a slave the rest of her life. All women were slaves. Unless you didn't get married, like Sarah, our mother, who is in heaven. And that's the true woman, right? The real, the reality. This is this little law we're not under. It was a lying, we were put under the bondage and the curse of Yahweh. And we became subject. But it was natural because it was bound to happen that we had to die, right? We talked about that. So the 10th commandment talks about his Sabbath. Yahweh says, you'll not enter into my rest. Well, the reason why we cannot enter into his rest is because his rest is death. At the end of his 6 days on the Sabbath, you had to cease doing anything. You had no more free will. And you had to offer a sacrifice, the death of your firstborn child. It did not end well. It was death. And we could never enter into it. We could never appease him because he is the deity of wrath and vengeance. He told you that. It's a big ruse. It's a lie. But what it's trying to get you to see is that you have to die and experience this death, and it's not really death. He's a liar. He's just a liar. What happens is you wake up and you become free. You learn lessons in it. So the Sabbath that our Heavenly Father made is coming on the backs of 6 days, first fish, then birds, then mammals, then men, and then the Sabbath. We will enter into his rest. And Hebrews chapter 4 says it's the millennial, and I believe that's even typical of something more real. One day, the nirvana, but that's not what our interest here today would be. We're trying to understand what this entering into his millennial rest, this is one of the fulfillments that probably the only one we'll even have anything to do with. I mean, the Bible is eternal. It's the eternal word. A million years from now, we'll still be reading the Bible. It's like a flower it's got the DNA that keeps unfolding, and beauty and colors and petals, and you find out there's more to that flower than just the beauty on the outside. Partake of it internally, and you will enter in to his rest. Everything that is in the Bible was fulfilled. In this, Joshua is right. Everything was fulfilled in that generation. All the prophets. But the book of Revelation, which was written 100 AD, is after it was all fulfilled. And there it is all again. To be fulfilled in another what? Spiritual fulfillment? The kingdom did come in the first century. The kingdom was within you. But it didn't come in the sense of our earth being transformed. But individually, anyone at any time, this is cyclical. The devil goes in, the dragon into the bottom of the pit for 1,000 years, and then they open it up and comes back out again. Night follows day, and day follows night. We're looking at this historical book as if it is history, but it's actually his story. His story is written in the sky, and his story is Jesus' story, which is our story, and we're all the fool, which is in the deck of cards. There are 52 weeks in a year, and there are 52 cards. There are 4 suits. You've got your diamonds, your hearts, your fortune, the diamonds, the hearts, romance, your destiny, and you're the fool. And where does the little joker end up? That's you. And you're being played. That's why it's playing cards. And these cards are like astrology. They rule over you because you have not yet overcome the beast. And the beast are these carnivorous animals, these zodiac, these demonic beings that are controlling your life. And you think it's your destiny. But actually your destiny is to be born again and to be no part of this world. So the 12 tribes are ever reoccurring. Moses, 1300 BC, and his 12 tribes, and going down into Egypt. It's a parable. It happened then, it happened in an age before it, and it's about to happen now. And we're going to make the Exodus. And in a million years from now, we'll be able to read the Bible, the holy book. It is forever. It is eternal, this book. My words will not pass away, Jesus said. And yet Paul says they heard the gospel because his word went forth from the stars. This story, history, is Jesus' story, our story in Christ. And it's written in the stars, and it was written there from the beginning. In the beginning, I used to think that they were called playing cards because you played with them. But we were never told what the word play means. We see children playing, and we think, oh, well, that just means it's not real. They're just having fun. It's just to play with, like a toy. Oh, that deck of cards is not a toy. Playing is the word play, like at the theater. They have plays at the theater, and there are dramas being depicted on the pictures on the cards. And you have cue cards. We still have them. And you would hold up a cue card, and the person in the play or the act would read the card. He's playing a part. Friends, you're an actor. You're just playing a part. You're following the cue cards. You're not playing in the sense of it's not important. Yeah, it is kind of like pretend. That's what it is. But it's rehearsal for the big job. And it represents what we're actually doing. So the tarot is this nothing more, nothing less, but a deck of playing cards for the play or the theater. And every story in the theater was the same story. It was the same story. The one written in the sky, in the stars, it's astrology. It's just a script. It's the written word that came down from the Father. And that we must go and tell the world and find the meaning to these stories. And understand it's our destiny. So the beginning is a never-ending source. Plateau unto plateau, from glory into glory. And it says that we shall go from glory to glory, even as was done by the Lord. So even Jesus went from glory to glory. He descended below all things and ascended far above all things. And he's ascending. Yes, he's arisen. And you must behold him and recognize him. He's right there feeding you the fish and the honey. And leading you and giving you eternal living waters that will bubble up from your innermost being. And your eyes will become opened and you will recognize the Christ as you walk along after the crucifixion and the resurrection has occurred. And you realize what that resurrection is. And then you go and tell the world that he has risen. Why do you think Yahweh has not only made all these laws, forbade you to do this and that, and you know how religions are always like, don't drink and don't take herbs or drugs, and then they make all these other drugs that kill you and tell you to do that. The pharmaceutical ones, the sorcery. But natural herbs that will give you enlightenment, that you might enter into what? The higher stage, the next stage, the seventh realm. Fish, birds, mammals, men. You want to go on here? The seventh day, man will enter into the place of rest, where they're no longer working or attaining, but we have attained. Now, it is ultimately a pie in the sky. He dwells in unapproachable light. We'll never achieve it because we're always progressing eternally. But we have layers, stages, plateaus that we reach. The top of the mountain is not the top. There's always more beyond. There's the clouds, and above the clouds is we haven't seen it yet. Eye hath not seen, ear hath not heard. But we will continue to go. And there will be stages of rest and, work. Not slavery, but we'll be compelled to go forward and run the race that we might gain the prize. And after we get the prize, we go, oh, wow, we see. I was blind and now I see, And then we'll find out that there's a third eye. Oh, wait till we open that one. Right? And then only the Lord knows what's next. So, how do you enter into the true Sabbath? Because Jesus did talk about the true Sabbath. But he said it had nothing to do with working physically on the earth. He says, my Father keeps working until now, and I keep working. What kind of work? Well, he talked about getting the sheep out of the ditch. The sheep got in the ditch because he died. And that's because of Yahweh and his law. And all the sheep went in the ditch, and he says, the blind leading the blind right into the ditch. Now what do? Because Jesus came back and his hired hand had enslaved all of his people. And so he said, you good for nothing servant. And he casts them out, and he becomes the good shepherd and leads them to fountains of living waters. Now, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to go to a paradise. Fish don't live in a paradise, live in the water. Birds live in the sky. We want the whole kit and caboodle. Man is king of all of it. And man himself, the crowning of the creation, finally, the whole creation enters this rest. We see it in Revelation, where we see the 4 living creatures around his throne. They're no longer carnivores, ravenous beasts, but they're living creatures with wings saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, the Almighty." What I'm telling you is that we're entering into the next level. It has nothing to do with keeping a Sabbath in one of the days of the week. That's a type. That's like baptism. They did it in the old times to represent something that is the great baptism of life into the waters of this world. And you see in that picture there, the birds, and you see the fish. And John the Baptist is lying there like he's dead, and he's having this revelation, and the angels are coming down, and they're ushering him in the ascending to go into paradise. They're saying, the body died, now you become born again. And Jesus gave him his robes, and we became one with Christ. But the fish in the water and the birds in the sky represent the lower and the higher. And they all are there to sing a song of harmony and to guide us. They're just the symphony, and we're the orchestrator. And in order to orchestrate this beautiful harmony, we have to die to the flesh and move on to the next level and open our eyes to witness the revelation. So how do we do that? Everything is a natural thing. The physical body is kept alive through a magical process of digestion, assimilation, and magic. Your body, your eyes see, your ears hear. It's a magical thing. But you have to eat in order to experience the knowing, which is this world. The experience, the good and the evil experiences. To have understanding. We have to go through the physical. So that means we've got to go to the next stage, which isn't going to be the same as this physical. It's going to be entering into something. And that's the place where we get to the goal of this level. There's going to be many more levels after this, but the Sabbath keeps happening, and then there's a Jubilee, and then the 50th year is the Jubilee, and everybody's, forgiven of everything, and we're all one, and we come together in a big celebration, and we all rest. What does it mean to rest? Well, rest is half of everything. There's night and there's day. You rest at night. You're up during the day. Your body needs both. It's equal. Is he talking about going to sleep? You're not going to go to sleep. Many people go to sleep. We're not talking about just literal sleep. We're talking about, what does a person do when he sleeps? Well, if you're eating sugar and drugs and, harmful pharmaceutical drugs and poisons, then you can't sleep. If you've never been given a diet that gives you well-being, you can't sleep. Your bones ache. You'll never really get any rest. You'll lie there, but it's called rest, but you're not resting, and you're in pain. So rest essentially is leaving your body, leaving this world, and going home, going to the elders. It's time off from the working, from this physical world. Time off. We go back and we all get around the campfire and see mama and daddy. This is what we're going to do. When will you ever be able to do that? Well, in a typical way, you have a big celebration, Sabbath. We all meet at the synagogue, right? Or the convocation hall. A holy convocation. And we have rites and ceremonies that symbolizes greater things. But the great congregation is going to be in the sky when Jesus comes, and we're going to be with him. We're going to meet them in the air. And then we're going to come back and restore the world. We'll go back to working, back to the progression up to the next, Sabbath. But the millennial is going to be a place where we're going to be able to go home and to restore the world to paradise and not have any more troubles. Just get the rewards. So there is no reward. You'll not enter into my Yahweh's rest. It's just punishment. But Jesus said the Sabbath was made for us, not us for the Sabbath. So we're going to have the true Sabbath. And Yahweh didn't make the true Sabbath. He made a type, just like he made a temple. He made laws. It's all just types, not the real law. But the true temple, not made with hands, has also the true law, which is love, which is happiness, joy, and knowing, perfection, reality. So how do you enter into it? Well, there is a type that tells us how we do it. When the priest would go, remember, in Yahweh's law, nobody could go, and there was only one man that once a year got to go into the most holy. That's the place. And it was always on the Sabbath or on the holy day. It represented the reality, the Sabbaths, where we're going to finally all meet and go home. Well, only one man got to go home. And he went into the tent. Right at the entrance, there was a incense burning. And that incense, if you look it up, read on the internet, you'll find this. Don't believe me. But it was cannabis. And they burned cannabis at the entrance of the tent, the most holy. And there would a cloud of smoke that would go up when the high priest would go in. And he was required to stay in there long enough. They understood how long it would take for him to get high. And he talked to the divine being. He went to that place. But he had to be pure. His garments had to be spotless. And he only get to go once a year. And he had to go after he had been atoned and redeemed and everything by the blood of the Lamb. And this was symbolic of some greater realities that we probably already know and we don't need to get into here. So it was the cannabis that was given. Everything in the universe has a purpose. And the Lord has planted, no matter where you go in the world, there's all these varieties of plants. We talk about the daffodils, the bees. Now, modern daffodils probably even don't work, I'm told. They're hybrids and they don't produce the mad honey or the psychedelic experience. But I don't know. Maybe they could a little, or I don't know for sure. For one thing, I think they say that the bees don't like the modern ones. They have these huge flowers and they're hybrids, and I don't know, the bees don't generally like them. So in order to get this kind of honey from daffodils, you have to use wild daffodils. Another one is rhododendrons, and there's lots of other flowers. I personally think that in the true natural world, I mean, this is one of the reasons for Monsanto and all these evil people that are changing and making all these hybrids. They don't want you to have the experience to be like the divine being, to enter into rest or the celebration, go home and talk to the elders and have the awakening. They don't want your mind to be awakened. So they forbade herbs, they outlawed them, or they taught erroneous things, called them toxins. But you see how they've turned that word into a bad thing? Oh, it's a toxin. Guess what? You get intoxicated. That's a good thing. You get intoxicated with a toxin. So toxin is not bad. It's a Greek word, actually, toxin. And it was used in the Holy Rite. And actually, the daffodil, the Greek word or the original name of it is narcotic. It's a narcoxis or something. It's from where we get the word narcotic. So rhododendrons work very well too. Now I know there's lots of rhododendrons in Oregon up on Mount Hood. We used to see them. It was just so beautiful. But I believe that many of the original flowers produce this kind of honey. A lot of these hybrid things we have in the world today, there aren't even that many bees in the world, and the bees that we have are out there on this genetically modified corn and all this genetically modified things and hybrid like orchards of apples and things like this, which aren't natural. Apple trees aren't a natural thing. They go back to seed and they become crab apples, and eventually they just become the rose bush. That's their ancestor. But roses are very important as well. But the natural earth has these little secrets. And no matter where you live, the peyote or the kinnikinick or the cannabis or the daffodils or the rhododendrons or whatever. But the great priesthood at Artemis, they had their priests that were called Essenes. And some of the high priest women were called Melissae, which is the word bee. They were little bees. And they all was in this priesthood, and they would serve up this elixir. They was given the gift of awakening, and they did it on their Sabbaths and on their holy days. They would do it before night because they were entering into rest. And when you have the proper nutrition and herbs, your mind actually goes to the elders. You're supposed to have that rest every night. We're dying because we're not getting the rest. Your body should be out like a light, and you should be with the elders, with mommy and daddy and all your brothers and sisters every night. And then we come back into the world and we live this physical world. But the law of Yahweh and society as we have it, and the greed and the jealousy and all that we have in this world, the patriarch thinking he's going to beat us all into submission. This is just the stage where we're just above animal. We're going to go into another stage where we'll finally be able to enter into his rest. We'll have the congregation. We'll have the festivities, the celebration. It is not a literal thing. Yes, we can have them. They are typifying. We should continue to have our get-togethers and our celebrations. But we should also be taught what they mean. When a boy is 13 and has his bar mitzvah or whatever, or has his right of manhood, becomes a hunter or whatever, he is told, look, now you can partake of this herb. We're going to we're all going to go into the powwow room, and we're going to let you know that this is going to take you to see the Father and the Divine Mother, to the teepee in the sky. That's what they used to teach the children. And there were times in the past where men and women and society was in a much better place than we are in right now. Right now, we're going through this great big drama, the apocalypse. This is what we started this video off today. The apocalypse, and what does it mean? It means the revelation. And to be having the revelation, we need to awaken. And it means when you awake, the carcass dies. And John the Baptist looked down and saw his carcass dying, and a dead, filthy, rotted carcass. That's what this world was. We got to let it go. And we go to the next stage. Now, when you're doing a weekly Sabbath, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, this whole week was a learning process. I'm putting it behind me. I'm not going to worry about it. You must command those demons that the lower, you must harmonize them. You must tame and play the little flute and charm the serpent. And then the next 7 days is going to be a better 7 days, a higher place. You're going to know a lot of things you didn't know. And this keeps going, and you have these yearly celebrations that represents other things in the spiritual timetable that we'll go into one day. But this journey is forever. And when we're in this consciousness, It should only be to achieve some understanding, to have our eyes open so that we can make it to another level. But when we get to each level and we start off on a new course, a new world, before that happens, we have to go home and recuperate, to have restoration. So I believe the saints will have some kind of period of time where we will be in a paradisical, perfect, beautiful world. We'll all be there and singing and dancing. And then we will come back to this world and start working on a new creation. But the whole point of this is to show that the Eucharist, or the Holy Communion, is just exactly what it says. We will have communion with the Father and the Son and the Divine Mother. And we will have the great congregation. We'll all be there singing. That's why we sing. It's a type of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be in harmony there. And we're going to be happy. We're going to be having tears of joy. And we're going to see our family. And we're going to embrace them. And we're going to dance and hold them. And say, I love you. And then we'll part on our next journey. But we do this by partaking of the herbs. And every Sabbath should be like it was originally, the rubbing of the cannabis oil, the anointing holy oil on the top of the head, experiencing wherever land you live, the Lord has a specific type of herb for your people, for your place or your environment. Cannabis was a big one. Up in Syria, they used the honey, and Jesus used the honey, and he gave them, and it says their eyes became opened. And the honey he was using is the honey from the Daffodils, which is from the priesthood of the Melissae and the Essenes from the Temple of Artemis. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful day, guys. May the Lord bless you and enlighten your mind and give you rest. May he bring your life into harmony with the truth and all those that you love. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.